Just trying not to fuck up when I started, and I accidentally took a picture and talked a bunch. Howdy there, and welcome to another quarantine edition episode of Crit Day. This is the third one, and today we're going to talk about books. Wow, that's incredible. So today I wanted to talk about a variety of art books. I've got all sorts sitting on my shelves, and I just wanted to share a couple that I enjoy for a variety of different reasons. All sorts of cool stuff here. I'll be honest, I haven't read some of these all the way through. You'll see why once I get to them. But they're all great books, and they're cool, and they're fun reads. So first thing about me is I'm quite the art book collector. When I was in college, I picked up a book maybe 5 or 6 times. Now I am out of college and I have to stop myself from going to the bookstore because I buy so often. That being said, I don't go to traditional bookstores all that often. My favorite bookstore is a little place called The Book Trader in Philadelphia. Shout out to The Book Trader. It's a thrift store for books. I'm sure most cities have something along the lines. I actually have a blog from a while ago about why your local book trader is better than your stupid college textbooks. And that's because for the price of one textbook for art history or whatever, you can find 10 books with a whole lot of information. I personally have been on a big biographical kick lately. I'm super interested in the personality behind artists and what goes into their craft and their life. And a lot of times that's hard information to find. That brings us to our first book. This has been in my collection for years, one of the few books that I did actually read in college, and that is Michelangelo by Rolf Schott. This is a really cool book because it talks about the personality of a Renaissance artist. And if you know anything about Renaissance art, artists were treated like artisans, like a bricklayer or a carpenter. It was a craft more so than the way that we look at fine art today. So people didn't really give a shit about the personality of the artist or who the person was. So most of what we know about these people is through their work and through the times they produced and if there was any subtle stylistic changes within those times. But this book really talks about Michelangelo as a person, and it's got a lot of interesting insight. It's a little bit older. See if I can figure out when it was printed. Hudson, London, 1963. Second impression, 1965. Printed in France. So it's an old-ass book. But, again, this information isn't changing. I don't think a whole lot has come out, but it's just all sorts of cool stuff. As I said, we didn't know much about these artists. We're really in the first 100 years of people really giving a shit about what artists are outside of just their art. The factor of having a personality is relatively new. That brings us to our second book, which is The Man Who Became Caravaggio. This is a super, super thick book. I will let you know it's not the most exciting of reads, especially at the beginning, but this is about Michelangelo Merisi, who is more commonly known in art as Caravaggio. He had a very interesting life that we do know a little bit about, but at the same time, it's small fragments, and we piece it together, but everybody's kind of guessing. You know, you put the pieces that we have together, and everybody gets a different conclusion. This book by Peter Robb, you can see his name right there, has some really interesting points. He puts together the history of, we'll call him Caravaggio, and talks about his checkered past. A lot of what we know about him is from prison records, and he actually comes to the conclusion that Caravaggio was likely murdered. So it's a whole lot of insight. As I said, it's kind of a boring read, especially at the beginning. It takes a very analytical approach, and it's cool for the average person. I'm a huge Caravaggio fan, so I knew a lot of the information going into this, but when you read it, he really lays out what we know, what we don't know, and how we've pieced together what we do know about Caravaggio. He is a hugely influential painter, but a lot of his work was looked down upon at the time that it was made. So it's one of those cases where an artist became influential post-mortem. So his work was discovered, and that's where his influence kind of came about. And then we pieced together where he fell in the art history realm. And so a lot of his mark has come later. So it's interesting to hear how he was perceived, how he interacted, and how he was a part of the art world at that time. This next book is one that I have not gotten around to reading yet, but it is going to be quite the project once I do get to reading it. You can see how thick it is. But Jackson Pollock, one of the most influential painters in the last 100 years, some would argue to say ever. I'm a huge Jackson Pollock fan. I found this book for $11, and I was very excited to buy it. National bestseller. It is by Stephen Neffe and Gregory Witzman. All sorts of reviews on it. What I have skimmed through seems very interesting. Pollock was an interesting character. There's all sorts about his life, sort of the tragedy of it. He unfortunately died in a drunk driving accident. There's even some claims that he stole some of his work. His wife is a very talented and often uncredited painter, which I think is something that gets overlooked a lot, which is kind of disappointing. But yeah, Jackson Pollock biography. Very excited to read that. I thought I would share. It's a cool book. So those are my top 3 biographies right now. That's sort of a what I've read, what I'm currently reading, and what I'm excited to read in the future. I wanted to go through a couple cool references that you can find. The first one, if you know me, if you know anything about me, you know that I'm hugely into the macabre, horror scene, horror art, all sorts of that stuff. So this book, Horror Movies by Daniel Cohen, it's a really cool collection and documentation of horror movies throughout time. I've got a nifty comic called Big Man Plans by Eric Powell and Tim Weish in there. Can't say that I've actually read it, but it had cool art and it was like $1, so I bought it. But yeah, so it's just got it's a cool collection of tales about horror throughout time, how it's developed, the big names within it, and one of the another thing that I've had a blog about before is one of the overlooked elements, especially of classic horror, is hand-painted posters and movie posters. Just a lot of the artistry of the film genre has largely been lost, or at least that classic feel has been lost, and I'm a huge fan of that. So it's nice to have a reference for that, because I take a lot of inspiration from that classic horror in my own work. Another reference book that I've had for a while, that I've been using for a while, I've used this for a whole series of fun blogs, and just when I need something goofy to inspire me, that's a book called Carnivalesque. It's by Timothy Hyman and Roger Malbert. It's just a nifty little collection of kind of goofy art throughout time, sort of history's telling of the non-serious. All sorts of fun stuff there. I mean, even classical work from the 1500s, 1600s, throughout time. I think, especially with classical art, we tend to have this romanticized view that it was all the beautiful church paintings that we're thrilled with. And yeah, that's what a lot of it was, because that's where the money was in making it. But there's also a lot of goofy, crazy, weird stuff throughout time. So it's cool to see a collection of that, especially when it categorizes it by time and shows how that's developed. The next one isn't a specific reference. So this is just my most recent pickup from this book series. Haring. I'm a huge Keith Haring fan. But this publishing company, Taschen, I'll be honest, I don't think that I know an artist who doesn't have one of these books in their collection. They have a ton of them. They're super simple. It's basically just a collection of the work. There's biographical elements in there, but the text is limited. It's short, it's simple. I have several of these. Most artists I know have several of these. They're relatively cheap. They're great references for high quality photography for your favorite artists. Like I said, I keep these as a reference. They're not really a reading tool, but when I want to flip through the work of my favorite artists and not burn my eyes out of my skull like I have been editing these YouTube videos, these Taschen books are awesome for that. Like I said, they're like $20 maybe a piece. So if you're looking for a reference, something to just flip through, something to have on your shelf, great coffee table book too. These Taschen publishing books are a great tool. Next up, this one is it's an artist book. It's a current artist book. And I wasn't planning to use it on this video. I actually bought this book for my girlfriend for Christmas, and it is just the most beautiful art book I have seen, and that is Wisdom of the Furnace by Tyler Thrasher. It's a really simple, just photographic collection of his work. If you're not familiar with Tyler Thrasher, he combines art and science. He crystallizes things on things like butterflies. Here you can see some of his work, but this is just such beautiful documentation of his work, his process, what he does. Again, great back cover. I mean, from front to back, this is just a really, really great book. I think I only paid like $70 for it. It was like nothing for as high quality of a book for this is. I was at Powell's Books in Portland this past summer, and I flipped through books in their exclusive collection that were recently printed, nowhere near as high quality as this, and they were upwards of like $500. So if you're a fan of Tyler Thrasher's work, you definitely need to get this book. If you haven't heard of Tyler Thrasher, definitely check him out and take a look at his book, because like I said, it's the most beautifully photographed and printed book that I have in my collection, and probably that I've ever seen. Yo, Liquid Death, hit me with that sponsorship. Thanks for watching another episode of the quarantine edition of Crit Day. Let me know if you've been enjoying these. They're certainly getting a lot easier to make, and I've been having a lot of fun making them. For the books that I listed today, the ones that I can find on Amazon or on other outlets, I will link down below. If you can't find it, hit me up. Maybe I'll let you borrow it. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, follow me at Forrest Hines Art. I've taken a day or two off, but I've got a new painting started that I'm getting ready to slap with its first big coat. So I'll be going live over the next few days as I paint that. Come and join me while I do it. Follow all things Plebeian. You can go to the home, www.plebeian.us. We've got some exciting content stuff coming. You can follow us at both of our Instagrams, at plebeian_us and at plebeian.mag. Follow us on Facebook, Plebeian Inc. Follow us on Twitter at Plebeian Deli. We got so much social media. And of course, come back here every day until we get out of quarantine for more of these crit days. Subscribe to the YouTube. We got podcast highlights. We got all sorts of content coming. I hope you're enjoying this series. I know that I am, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.